Hello, my friends. Lori Ashcraft here. I'm your host for Viva La Evolution, which is the training and consulting branch of Recovery and Resilience Solutions, which is part of Crestwood Behavioral Health. And today we have another remarkable guest. I'm so happy to bring this to you. This is another conference I went to. I don't go to very many conferences, but when I do, I meet these amazing people. And this woman named Kris, you know how I usually sit in the back so I can slip out if I get bored? Well, so I'm in the back, happy in the back, and she starts her presentation, and she just captured me right from the get-go. So I moved right up to the second row, and with my phone, I took pictures of every one of her slides. They were so good. And we talked afterwards and got to know each other a little bit. And then a couple months went by, and I called her and I said, "Hey, Kris, I would love for you to share your ideas about leadership with our viewers." And she agreed to do it. She's going to talk to us about a model of leadership that I think is for the future. I mean, it would be great right now, but when I think of millennials and Gen X's, I want them to have this kind of leadership. I don't want them to have what us older people had. It was okay at the time. I guess we needed that. That was where we were in our evolution. But for new people coming up, I would love it if they had leaders that based their work on love and respect and saw their job as bringing forward the gifts in the people that work for them. So without any more babbling on from me, let's hear from Kris and hear about her story of recovery and how she got into this model of leadership. Here we go. Okay, well, Kris, thank you so much for joining us today. I was just telling the folks how I first saw you at the Copeland conference, which was an amazing conference, by the way. I just loved
Was
it.
absolutely
But what was the name of it? I don't remember the name.
taking action for well-being.
Taking Action for Wellbeing, right? Yeah. Perfect title because that's what it turned out to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then I got a hold of you and you were willing to share your wisdom and experience with us. So,
Well, it is absolutely my pleasure. I'm so delighted that we got to meet and that we're able to have this conversation today.
me too. Me too. Well, why don't we start by you telling us your story of recovery? That I remember that being very heartwarming for me, and I'm sure our listeners would appreciate it too. Is that okay
Sure,
with you?
absolutely. Yes,
Okay.
I am happy to share.
Okay.
I always like to start with the fact that my story of recovery did not start in a place where I knew I was in recovery.
Hmm.
I was someone who grew up in a home with a disabled parent. And as the oldest child, I was the caretaker.
Mhm.
And I took that role very seriously. And I would say that my main motivation in life was supporting my father, who was disabled, and
Uh,
making sure that he was okay.
yeah.
And it truly is one of the biggest blessings of my life that I was able to support my family in that way, but that did have to come from neglecting myself for many, many years,
Mhm.
putting myself on the back burner and not really prioritizing my own mental or physical health.
Mhm.
And so once I was in college, I experienced my first anxiety attacks, which were so bad that I was fainting in
Mhm.
public.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so that's when I realized that there was something deeper going on. And although on the surface, I would say I was managing pretty well,
Mhm.
internally, I was really, really hurting and struggling.
Mhm.
And so it took a long time for me to come to terms with the fact that I experienced trauma, that I experienced all of these things. Because the I think the one part that was really difficult was that my parents were great. And I didn't understand that even with great parents, there are things that can happen that can affect you for the rest of your life in a
Yeah.
negative way.
Mhm.
And it took me a long time to come to terms with that and
Mhm.
even recognize that I needed to, or at least wanted to, go on a recovery journey.
Mhm. Mhm. Hmm. Hmm. Well, you know, that whole time you were not paying attention to yourself, you were probably accumulating some wonderful tools to help other people. Taking care of a parent
Yes,
tends to
absolutely.
be good training grounds. Yeah.
Yes, that's one of the things that I say all the time because now I'm a certified peer recovery specialist.
Yeah.
And one thing I always say is that I've always been a peer. I've always been this person. I just now have a title and a job
Yes,
for it.
that's good. I love that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So taking care of your father and your family, really,
Yes.
going to college, having some meltdowns, and then
Mhm.
at some point realizing that you needed to take better care of yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What happened next?
Well, it's an interesting story, and I I'm going to be very cautious when I share this because I do know that although I experienced what the harm that I'm about to share, I am much better now. I am in a better place, and I have learned and grown from it. But I do know that when I share it, it can tend to, um, upset folks or make people feel uncomfortable. So I just like to put that little
Okay.
warning in.
Well,
Um,
thank you so much for that. But our viewers have heard it all, so
okay, okay, great.
you
I'm
don't have
happy
to
to
be
hear
careful with
that.
them.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
I started my journey of trying to navigate my mental health by first going to the clinic on campus that was available to us.
Mhm.
And in the first meeting with the school therapist, they were unfortunately racist towards me.
Mhm.
They assumed that since I was from Baltimore, and I should clarify that I was in college in Philly,
Okay.
they assumed since I was from Baltimore that I grew up around gang and gun violence. They said these things out loud to me.
Uh,
And also, when I shared with them that my father was not in the home, they automatically assumed that he abandoned us.
hmm.
But in reality, my father was disabled. He was in a nursing home.
Mhm.
And at the time, it was very hard for me to process that because of what society and my peers and my family have always told me about mental health, that therapy is not for Black people. That was something that was told to me very, very early on in life, and that those spaces were not curated for us. And I really wanted to believe that to be different. But at that time, it really confirmed like
Yeah.
maybe they were all right. Maybe I shouldn't try to go down this route. And so that unfortunately led me to furthering pushing off my mental health care for a few more years until I hit another wall and had to try again.
Chris, I am so glad you're bringing this up because I can say things about therapists because I have been one.
Mhm.
So I'm not doing a they kind of thing. I'm doing a we kind of thing. Um, it's especially when you're just seeing one person after the other, like in a clinic. It's
Mhm.
easy to fall into those stereotypical responses and make assumptions. And it's
Absolutely.
just the worst thing we can do. So I'm so glad you're shining a light on that for us. Because in your case, it caused you to not feel like they could be helpful and put
Absolutely.
off your treatment further. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. And I desperately needed that treatment, if I'm being honest. And I try to look back at that time with a lot of compassion to that therapist, to my younger self who didn't understand why that was happening to me.
Yeah.
But it really propelled me into that advocate role.
Mm-hmm.
and learning how to stand up for myself and speak about the things that I need and I want. And so I definitely look at that time as like a learning experience
Yeah,
for
there
me,
you
even though
go.
it was really
Yeah,
challenging.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Well, if we can turn challenges into learning, I
Yes,
think it's the best way to live with a bad situation. Is to step back
absolutely.
and say, not be a victim, but say, what did I learn from that? So
Absolutely.
good for
Yes, I
you.
agree. I think for a long time, I was hoping that with recovery would come less challenges. And in some areas, that is true.
Mhm.
But for me, I have found more peace in knowing that I can overcome any challenge and knowing that I can use these challenges to learn, to grow, to become a better person. And that for me feels more in my control than trying to keep bad things away
Yeah,
from
yeah,
happening.
yeah. I love that approach. That's
Thank
really
you.
good. So after you had that disappointing experience, what
Mhm.
happened next?
I believe I had another mental health crisis where I was deep into untreated depression, untreated anxiety, untreated eating disorder. And I was so unhappy every day with how I was feeling, with how I viewed myself. And one day I just woke up and I said, I'm going to take control of this situation. I
Huh.
believe that there is a truer, more beautiful world out there. And I had great role models around me that
Mm.
was showing that there is more beauty and possibility. And so I just took that step again and leaned into therapy and started a bunch of different practices just to see what could work for me. Some of that was medication. I went to numerous trauma coaches and actually all different types of coaches. I did acupuncture. I really put the pedal to the metal and was ready to lean into taking care of myself.
You just hit my three main
Oh, did I?
challenges:
Okay.
depression, anxiety, and eating disorder.
Wow.
Those were mine too. And I know that when you're in the midst of those, it's hard to step out and do what you're describing. You just kind of
Yes,
want to stay in bed or something. You don't have that I'm gonna fix this kind of thing. So somehow you
absolutely.
found that I'm gonna fix it um, part of yourself and put it
Mhm.
into action.
Yes. I would
Congratulations.
thank you. Thank you so much for saying that. And I'm so grateful for that version of me that could push through
Yeah,
all of that.
yeah.
And I also know that so much of that comes from my family lineage. I come from a family of people who had so much thrown at them, but still overcame, still were kind and thoughtful
Mhm.
people. And I wanted to be just like them.
Oh God.
And
Yeah.
yes,
Oh, what? How
I was
lucky for
very
you
lucky in that
too.
way. Yes, exactly. I
Yeah.
was. I was very
Yeah.
lucky.
That's great. So you had a strong family that was a good role model for you.
Yes, I did.
So it was probably in your genes too, that let's get up and get going here kind of thing.
Yes, I think my mother would say so. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so you got some treatment.
Yes.
What would you say worked the best for you? Or can you distinguish that? Sometimes when there's a soup of stuff, we don't really know what helped.
Yes. I think so many aspects were very helpful, but the somatic practice of acupuncture really allowed me to connect back to my body.
Hmm.
And that was the key to all of the things that I was dealing with my mental
Hmm.
health. I
Hmm.
was fundamentally disconnected from my
Mhm.
body. And I understand why. I was in places where I may not have always felt safe. I was constantly looking for the next thing to happen with my father, who was, in and out of the hospital and things like that. So I didn't have time to be present. I really had to look forward a lot. And so having those somatic practices to bring me back to my body was
Mhm.
life changing. And I think the first time I ever experienced something like that was in acupuncture.
You know, I am just in the last year learning about somatic practices
Okay,
because my whole relationship with my body has been, I don't care if you're tired, we've got to get this done.
absolutely.
I don't care if you ache. It's like I just didn't listen to it.
Right.
Um, and this last year, I've learned to listen to it and realize how much wisdom it has. Um,
Absolutely. Yes.
beyond just my brain clacking away, that my body actually knows something. So you learned that early on in your process.
I
Great.
did. Thank you. Thank you. It was probably and still is one of the most difficult things for me to navigate because my go to for safety is to disassociate
Mhm.
and to disconnect those feelings from my body. And even now, when I have my sessions with my trauma coach, they will have to pause and they'll be like, well, how are you feeling in your body? And I'm like, you're
Yeah.
right. I haven't
Yeah.
considered that, have I?
Yeah.
I am very good at like intellectualizing and understanding feelings, but
Mhm.
when it comes to actually feeling things in my body,
Mhm.
it's very difficult for me still.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it is definitely a goal on my list to always try to come back to here.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
acupuncture was the first thing that you can put your
Yes.
finger on that helped you. Were there other things that helped you with this?
Absolutely. I personally really love talk therapy,
Mhm.
especially with the trauma coach that I have now, because like I said, I am someone who is great at understanding concepts,
Mhm.
but not always how to take those concepts and actually put them in my life to
Mhm.
change things.
Yeah.
And so it allowed me to get out of my head a little bit and
Mhm.
see the areas where I could lean more into creating lasting change instead of, just dealing with the things that kind of pass and go when it
Mhm.
comes to thoughts.
Mhm.
Yeah, so talk therapy was outstanding for me.
Uh, uh. Sounds like you had talk therapy with a trauma focus on it.
I did. I
Yeah.
surely did.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that was very important to me. During the pandemic, during the lockdown, I took a trauma informed course. And at the end of it, I actually became a trauma informed, what is the word I'm looking for? I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the word.
Practitioner or
Yes, coach. There we
oh,
go.
okay.
And I initially took it just because I wanted to learn more about my own trauma and
Yeah.
how it was showing up in my life. And since I had the time, it was the perfect opportunity for me to lean into that. But once taking that course, I also then understood how necessary for at least for my healing for trauma informed practices to be incorporated.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. How do they say this? They say it's not, it's not what you did, it's what happened to you.
That is what they say.
Yeah. It's a much better approach to working with us because
I agree.
uh, don't just blame us and figure out what's wrong with us. Look at what happened to us and how we were able to survive it.
Mhm.
See our strengths and maybe we can mobilize those a little bit.
I mean, that is a beautiful way to say that. I agree with you.
Well, it seems, well, let's continue this story then.
Yes, let's continue the story. Where
Tell
were
me how
we?
you got into this career.
Oh, so after I took that trauma course, I was looking online to see what types of jobs I would be able to get with this new education that I had, and I came across a job listing for a peer specialist. And I am not going to lie to you, Lori. When I first saw it, I thought it was a scam. I did because I was like, "What do you mean the only qualification is that you have to have mental health issues.
I know. Where do
I'm
you see that?
overqualified. And so, I mean, and that was my introduction to peers,
Huh, huh,
specialist peer support. I had
yeah.
no idea about it. I have never been taught it growing up. I never was informed about it. So my first introduction was actually working as a peer at a mobile crisis unit
So did
for
you go through a
young adults.
training? Did you go through a peer training of some sort?
Oh, absolutely. So much training. Yes.
Did you do that at where'd you do that?
So, with the certification process in Maryland specifically, it's kind of like a choose your own adventure. And
Mhm.
so you're able to choose courses and events and classes and trainings that kind of align with what type of peer support you want to do. And then you just find those different organizations that are offering those courses. And then you're
Oh,
able to get the CEUs.
interesting. So
Mhm.
you can shop around and find the things you
Exactly.
need and what works for you. And then do you take a test for certification?
Yes, yes. You have to take a test, fill out the application, of course. Yes.
Huh. Okay, so you figured out this scam.
Thank goodness it wasn't a scam.
Yeah, but it is like all the things that we would think we wouldn't get hired for.
Exactly.
And then that's what they're looking for. It's like, are you kidding
Yes.
me?
It was
You
very
that
confusing
part
for
of
me.
me?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's it's funny that you bring that up because I think that was a huge turning point for me as well, recognizing how different working in the peer field felt versus working in other places and how open and normal it was to just kind of be yourself. And
Yeah.
also it was like invited. It's like part of your job to be
Yes.
yourself. And
Yes.
so it was hard at first. I wasn't fully trusting of it.
Uh-huh.
It took me a little bit of time to really settle into what that role really needed.
Yes. Yeah.
Because there's definitely a level of vulnerability
Oh,
that is required to do that work.
more than any other behavioral health job. Um, because our story is our biggest tool,
Yes,
sharing our own experience, which leaves you feeling pretty vulnerable. But if you're
it
not willing to
does.
do that, it's hard to be very effective. I know for years, um, I was afraid to tell anyone that I had any kind of mental health challenges um, because I grew up before there was anything called peers. There were in my um, work experience. That didn't come until I was like in my 50s, and we started talking about peer support specialists,
Hmm.
recovery. We didn't even talk about recovery before then. We
Right.
just figured, all the books said, if you have a mental illness, you're just going to get worse. They
Hmm.
changed the books by now.
Oh,
But
thank goodness.
in those days, that was pretty much the general thinking. And so I couldn't tell anybody. And I
Right.
would go through medication changes and just be dragging myself around and be a total mess. And I'd say something about, oh, it's my allergies or something, just to get by.
Oh, wow.
And I was often the only woman on an all male management team.
Hmm.
Already, I was like different and suspect. So if I'd have said, oh, and by the way, I have a few mental illnesses, that would have been,
Mm.
you're out of here, girl.
Yes. Yes.
But when let's see, this was probably 30 years ago, um, we started training and hiring peers. And
Wow.
I then felt safe to say, me too.
Yeah.
You know, I'm taking the same medication you guys are.
Hmm.
I have the same stuff you're dealing with. And it was so, like you were saying, freeing. I can't remember your
Yeah.
word. But it was like, and suddenly I had uh, companions, other people that had the same thing. It was
Right.
so beautiful for me to be able to say that and move into that space.
Yeah.
I get
I'm
what that was
so
like for
happy
you.
for you. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
I really am. And I'm sorry that you had to live so much of your life holding on to that shame. Because I
Yeah.
imagine that that made things even more difficult.
Oh, it did. It absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, same here. I understand.
yeah. Okay, so you became a peer support specialist,
Did.
and how was that going to work as a peer support specialist?
I loved the work that I was doing. I specifically was working with young adults, 16 to 21 at that time. And the work I was doing was to support folks who may have had their experiences with crisis, but needed more support to actually feel
Mhm,
regulated to continue about life
mhm,
because
mhm.
unfortunately, life has to continue on even after one of the scariest
Yeah.
times that you're
Mhm,
going through. And so I was there to provide that long-term support, especially because so many of them, it was their first time experiencing anything like that.
mhm,
And so I loved the work, mainly because I remembered so vividly my first time experiencing things and how scary it was and how challenging. And I knew that if I had someone like me who could
mhm,
kind of talk me through the things and
mhm.
explain the jargon to me, it would have been so helpful.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so every day I was grateful to do the work.
Now, this in a crisis program?
It was. Mhm.
So that's I just want to say kudos to the organization for putting a peer in a crisis setting because we did that too. We did that all across the country, but we got a lot of kickback. Um, and what we would hear is, well, peers can't work in a crisis setting. They would be triggered. They would be, and then we'd have to watch out for them and what happens if they relapse and we just had to keep saying we're going to do it anyway, and it turned out to be amazing. um,
Absolutely.
yeah, we had
Yes.
one setting. We were always trying to not ever do any restraints or seclusion.
Mhm.
Had one really large setting that had like, I can't remember exactly, but over 1,000 people came in every month, and we didn't even know half of them. They were just like off the street people that
Oh,
put.
wow.
And and of course, our staff said, we can't get to zero. We have to restrain people. And we said, well, we don't think you do. We think there's another way. Let's just do it. And so finally, the site got to zero restraints one month. So
Wow.
I rushed over and talked with them and I said, how did you do it? And these were the doctors. And
Mhm.
they looked back and forth at each other and they said, well, we couldn't have done it without the peers. I just get teary even thinking about that. So it was such a
Wow.
powerful moment.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that is so beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I
Mhm.
think a lot of times people forget that although we are open about our lived experience, we still are professionals. We
Yes,
still trained really hard to get to the places that we are at in our professional work. And just like anybody, and in reality, anyone can get triggered. It's not just
exactly.
specific to peers.
Yes.
And when that happens, if that happens, we lean into our supports. We go through the things that we tell our clients to do.
Yes.
And I would imagine we would respond accordingly if so. And so I'm happy to hear that y'all decided to go along with it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, we did. It was hard.
Oh, I can imagine. But the work that you were able to do over there has probably made it possible for us to do it here all these years later.
Well, probably. And are are you associated with On Our Own?
I am, yes.
Yeah. Is that where you work now?
Yes, that's where I work now.
Okay. I didn't remember if you worked there or not.
I
We
do.
met the On Our Own folks maybe at least 20 some years ago, and they were
Mm.
just starting. And we've kind of followed them over the years and just love the work that happens there.
Oh, I am truly blessed every day, if I'm
Uh,
being completely honest. On Our Own was one of the few organizations in Maryland that offered peer support trainings for free. And
hmm,
so prior to me working here, I utilized them all the time in order to get my credential.
hmm,
And so I was very grateful to see that how they were presenting themselves publicly is actually how they are behind the scenes too. Just
yeah,
truly caring and devoted people.
yeah, yeah. Well, aren't most of the staff their peers? Is that
All of us, yes,
oh, okay. I knew
yes,
in
all
the
of us are
beginning.
peers. Hmm.
I knew in the beginning.
And at least 70% of our board as
Oh,
well.
great, great.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So was that your first job then on our own?
After I'm sorry, do you mean the first job within peer support?
Yeah.
Oh no, so I worked for a crisis center before that and
Okay.
then came
Okay.
to On Our Own of
Okay.
Maryland.
Okay. I bet that was a shift. To,
It was something. It was definitely difficult, mainly because when I was working in crisis, I was providing direct peer support,
Mhm.
whereas my role now is to really support those who are doing the work. So helping the peers. I'm the transition age youth coordinator, so I work a lot with young adults to support them and to help them advocate for the care they deserve to receive. And so it is definitely a completely different role.
Yeah.
And I am so happy.
So would you say you're in a supervisory role or a management role? How would you?
Not necessarily. It feels like I'm more pragmatic. I'm more like a program, I'm not sure, coordinator, I think is what they
Okay.
would call it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So is this when you got interested in liberation leadership?
Yes, yes. So I was acutely aware that in this position there were going to be so many eyes on me and that I was going to have to do some really deep and honest work with myself if I was going to be able to fully show up and support other young adults.
Mhm.
And a lot of that had to do with feeling unworthy of the spaces that I was in, feeling scared, and I just didn't want to work from that place. I knew that my best work could not come from a
Mhm.
place of like scarcity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yes, that is when I started to dive a little bit deeper into learning about leadership and understanding what that meant to me. Because I think for a long time, I didn't even consider myself a leader, even
Yeah.
though others would refer to me that way.
Mhm.
And I think it was because I had such a disconnect from what society told me a leader was and how I was naturally.
Mhm.
And so it took me a long time to even settle into the idea of being a leader to begin
Uh,
with.
uh, uh. Probably a lot of people can resonate with that.
Oh,
It's a
yes.
jump, it's an
It
identity
is.
change. It's a big shift. Uh,
Yes.
and it sounds like you went into it educating yourself so you could be um, the best you could be.
Yes.
And
That was
then,
my goal.
yeah, and then you stumbled into this leadership style, or where did you find out about it?
So my amazing supervisor, Michelle Lifshin, is always looking for opportunities for us to learn and grow together. And they recommended a training that I came across called Leadership X. And it is done by the amazing Yejin Lee, who is such a thoughtful, kind, and truly inspirational person.
Mm.
And with the Leadership X series, it was specifically designed for folks to explore their complex and sometimes ambivalent feelings towards leadership. And when I read that, that was the first time I think I actually realized that I had ambivalent feelings towards it,
Oh,
that
oh.
I didn't actually fully feel comfortable being called a leader,
Mhm.
and that I did kind of get the ick from the idea of it. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
once I was able to attend their training, they are the individual who introduced me to liberatory leadership and the whole concept of it.
Oh. Can you say a little bit about the concept? Because I know it was new to me. I had to
Yes.
Google it when I got, after hearing you, I went home and Googled it. So,
Yes, it was new to me too. And I imagine that it will continuously change and have more depth to the definition as time goes on and as people explore it. But to me, liberatory leadership is really leading from a place of love. That's the one thing that stood out to me the most.
so good.
And and that is the main reason I gravitated towards it, because I personally, I think I am a person that leads from love, just in general.
Yeah, I do.
And so I was like, perfect. This is already something I do. It should be a natural shift. And but then it gets deeper than that. It's like the practice of really inviting us to lead with wholeness, lead with a sense of community. So really celebrating each other over competition,
Mhm.
and understanding that there is a collective freedom that comes from us all being able to lean into whatever feels good for us, whatever leadership means for each of us.
Mhm.
And in that way, the possibilities are endless, what liberatory leadership can do for an individual,
Mhm.
because it really depends on your own capacity and what you value. And I think that's the beautiful part of it, is that it's open to the interpretation of the person and
Yeah,
how they believe liberation should feel.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, why do you think they use the term liberation or liberatory? What, why did they choose that?
Hmm. I think it has a lot to do, if we're thinking about the recovery movement specifically, I think it's of the same mind of how do we go from living to thriving.
Okay.
And so I think it's of that same nature. Like, how do we take leadership from something that can sometimes feel very, this word, I can't even think of it, but it feels tight. It sometimes can feel harsh. At least for
Mhm.
me, it did.
Mhm.
And how can we take that and incorporate freedom into it, incorporating
Mhm.
the breath of being able to just be yourself? I
Yeah.
mean, that's that at the core is what liberation is, being able to be freely you.
Yes. So it's like the leader needs to do that for themselves, but it seems like if they're coaching and encouraging and developing the people who work for them, um, when I think of it that way, it has to do with, as a leader, my job is to liberate the gifts of each of
Hmm.
my staff,
Yes.
liberate and celebrate the gifts that
Hmm.
they have, and help them put those gifts into place as a leader.
Yes.
Did I get that close? Is that my,
Yes, I think so. There's actually a specific word for that. It's called luminary,
oh, I
which
like that
is
better.
it inspires a person who inspires people to rise beyond their own expectations of themselves.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Hmm.
Like a leader that sees something in you that you can't see in yourself.
Absolutely.
And then they work with you to pull that forward and put it into action, it sounds like.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I want to say to our viewers that Kris wrote a beautiful piece that goes with this podcast. Every podcast, as you know, has a narrative that goes with it. And this one, Kris wrote herself, and it just beautifully describes what she's
Oh,
talking
thank you.
about. So I just encourage you to take a look at it if you want more depth on that. Yeah. Well, were there any surprises in this when you started putting this into action?
So what surprised me the most was that it actually worked for me.
Yes.
That I found something that felt good.
Yeah.
Because for so long I just kind of believed that I couldn't be a leader and that I just didn't possess those qualities. But really, the reality was that I was trying to fit myself into a box that just was never meant for me.
Mhm.
And so, liberatory leadership really opened up the possibilities for what a leader is
Mhm.
and has allowed me to step into that in my own way.
Yeah.
And that was very surprising.
Yes. I can see where that would be surprising, especially when you've mostly been under a leadership style that wasn't based on love, that wasn't based
Absolutely.
on, I mean, older models of leadership are get people to get the job done. You know,
Yes.
that's kind of that's not fair to say it quite that way, but that's a shortcut of saying the leader gets people to get the job done. And there's nothing about love or calling forward their gifts or anything like that. So to go from the older model, not to be critical of it, just that that's what it was in those days. To go from that to a model where you you just trust that love will be the foundation and guide you
Absolutely.
as you move along. Now, sometimes, at least in my experience, um, I come across people that aren't very lovable. What does a leader
That's
do?
fair. That's fair.
What does the leader do in that case under liberatory leadership?
Well, as I said, I work with young adults. And if you have worked with that 18 to 29,
Yeah.
it is a tough population. It is
Yes.
not for everybody.
Yes.
And so I would say when there are folks who can lean a bit more challenging, um, I tend to be even a little bit more patient
Hmm.
if I'm being honest,
Yeah.
because my where I am coming from, the foundation of how I lead does not have to be based off of how someone treats me.
Oh, I
Uh,
love it. I love
yes,
it.
it is something that I offer to everyone, regardless of how they're showing up. And I'm one of those people that is very mindful that we have bad days.
Yeah.
We are the culmination of all the things that are going on in and around us. And so I I I still try to approach each person the same.
Yeah. You know what's so great about that is that you don't let the other person determine how you're going to be.
Yes,
You just be the way you be, and they can be the way they be, and that doesn't pull
exactly.
you off course. And you're so right about that age group. Gosh, I remember that age when I was that age. It was so painful and challenging.
Me too.
Um,
Too.
at that point, we don't have enough life experience to fall back on.
Right.
And we've been under the control of somebody, whether it's our parents or some kind of program we've been in. Um, and we're at that point where we 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 know we're going to be an adult, whether we like it or not. And it's scary, and we want to jump in and do it, and we think we know everything, and we find out that we don't. So that's an age group that would really challenge this model, I would think.
I
Yeah.
agree with you, which
Yes.
is why I said I was surprised that it worked.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, how great that you can trust love. Wow. Isn't that?
Thank you. Once again, I will credit my lovely father, who really instilled that in me. He was just a ball of love. And I, especially as an adult, really look back and admire how he was able to navigate the world with such kindness when he was dealing with so much. And and that really is something, like I said earlier, that I take with me everywhere
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because it's a choice.
Oh, yeah, it is. It
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, I make that choice to be that way.
Hmm.
Doesn't mean I'm always that way,
Oh,
but I
I
do
know.
try to.
I know.
No,
Um,
but look, let's add some reality back in. I'm not always kumbaya, but that is at the core what I am trying to do.
that's what you aspire to do.
Yes, it
Um,
is.
yeah. And, we all have our moments. I mean,
Of course.
yeah, but if we can keep going back to that model that we trust, I mean, we're all going to get pulled off course now and then. Uh,
Yes.
Again, especially with that age group, that's really challenging. So if you're ever going to learn to do this, that would be the perfect population to practice
Yes,
on.
I agree.
Yeah. So how long have you been doing this with this model?
Well, I would say probably since about February or March of this year.
Okay. Okay. So relatively new.
Yes,
Yeah. But enough
relatively
time to
new.
know that it works.
Yes, yes. And also being mindful that things may change. I am a very malleable person, and flexible to the needs around me. I am not someone of the mind of, oh, this is how we've always done it, so we have to continue doing
Oh,
it
thank
that
God
way.
you're not one of
Oh,
those.
think I am not. I am not. So yes, with that being said, with all those things, yes, it has worked really well. I have been able to create a community of young people who are engaged, excited, who come out to events, who attend the councils, and
Hmm.
who
Hmm.
use their voices in beautiful and impactful ways.
Hmm.
And so, yes, I would say that ever since I have leaned into this, the possibilities have only expanded
Hmm.
for
Hmm.
me and for the folks that I work with.
Yeah, I can see why. So if other people wanted to learn this approach, how would they go about it? Are there classes in it someplace?
Oh, so I'm not completely sure about if there's like access to classes and things like that. There is a website available that has a lot of the information about liberatory leadership, and it's kind of like an ongoing definition that they keep on there as well.
Hmm.
And I also tend to just listen to other people talk about it and listen to
Mhm.
their experiences through it. um, I tend to learn best from lived experience, of course, as a peer.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was how I really took the time to learn more about it. Um, but I do think at some point the idea of liberatory leadership is an invitation to act. And so, yes, we can learn as much as we can, but until you actually go forward
Mhm.
with trying to implement the things, it's always going to be a little bit more challenging. And
Sure, sure it is. I mean, that's true of any style you wanted to learn about.
oh, yes, yes. So
Seems
if
to me
I
like
would
it's,
say if someone wants to go towards, I would look up the education. I would listen to other folks' stories. But after that, I would really take some time to reflect on the parts of it that speak to you
Mhm.
and see if you can just incorporate one thing differently, or even if you can't incorporate it, even how you think about it or how you think about yourself.
Mhm.
Starting there, it doesn't have to be a whole shift in how you do things overnight. I think the beauty of liberatory leadership is that it opens up the door
Mhm.
and you're able to choose which path you go from.
Yeah, great, great.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say, if you were to teach a class on it, I would sign up.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah, too. Well, Kris, I just want to thank you so much for taking time to talk with us, to share your experience and your wisdom. Um, this material is so great. And I was thinking about it before you got on and thinking, this is the leadership style of the future. This is the style that would be most effective with Gen X people. You
I
know,
agree.
not the old, I'm going to tell you what to do kind of thing, but I just think, when I stand back and look at where we are over a longer period of time, it just seems like this is a style that we really need to put into practice. And yes, there will be people who won't respond to it right away. And that's where we need to just hold our ground and see if they can come around. And if I had a bunch of people working for me and I'm using this style, um, I know there'll be folks that won't be able to grasp it, that
Mhm.
won't be able to flourish under this model because for so long they've been told what to do.
Absolutely.
So that, we've got to, like you're saying, this is evolving. We've got to
Yes.
keep figuring out how to apply it and evolve it without losing the essence of it.
Mm,
Sometimes when things evolve, they start getting compromised to the point to where you don't even recognize them anymore.
I
So
agree.
we've got to evolve without compromising the principles, it seems like.
Yes,
Well,
that
thank
is
you
very
again.
important. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank,
That is an excellent point that you've made. I'm glad you said that it may not work for everybody, and that's okay.
yeah.
But maybe there are parts that you can start with. There are little
Yes.
pockets
Yes.
of invitation. That's what I kind of
Yes.
like to call
Yes.
them.
That's great.
Um, yeah, so thank you for saying that. And thank you so much for having me on and being willing to have this conversation with me and really being a beacon of light in the wellness space.
Hmm.
I commend anyone who leans into this craft of creating content for others because it is I think it is such hard work, I think.
It is. It really
Um,
is. Yeah.
yes, so thank you for sharing your heart with all of us and inviting me to
Oh,
experience it with you.
it's just an honor and a privilege. I must tell you, in closing, that when I sat down in your workshop and you started talking, I took a picture of every one of your slides on your power.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
I liked it so much.
Oh, that is so kind. Thank
Oh,
you.
yeah,
Thank you so much for saying that.
yeah,
I was unsure of how folks were going to react, if I'm being honest,
yeah.
because this was a deeply personal conversation that I was having about my journey towards liberatory leadership and how challenging it was and the things that I had to overcome in order to get to this place. But I understood how important it was to have a real conversation about what it really takes to be a leader
Mm-hmm.
and that it may not always be easy, but when we lean into community, when we lean into love and being more empathetic towards each other,
Mm-hmm.
there's so many beautiful things that can open up for us.
Isn't there? I know. You just said that so beautifully.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you so much again. And
Thank you.
maybe we'll do this again in a year and see what you've learned.
Yes. Oh, I would love that. A hundred
Okay.
percent. Put
Okay.
it on the calendar now.
Okay. Well, thanks so much. And I'll check back with you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. So there you have it, my friends. Wasn't that great? And Jean's going to put Kris's contact information up for you, so you'll know how to get a hold of her if you want to know more about liberation leadership, or liberatory leadership, pardon me. You can also Google it. There's all kinds of stuff online about it. But anyway, I just love what she had to say. And didn't you just love her? What a sweetheart. Okay, that's it for now. I'll see you next time. Love you lots. Take care.